miserable in sobriety, only thinking every single second of every day of what I could say or do to fix it, to change his mind, to make him forgive me again. There was no peace. There was no access to power. And all of my worthiness was contingent on whether or not this man was going to love me again.
Dr. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Aaron.
Absolutely. My first and most important question is, how are you doing? Like, actually, for real, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It's been a learning year. I think I thought that my book would come out in June and everything would explode. Not to say that I thought I would be a New York Times bestseller and become a famous person or anything like that, but that the work would flood in, that people would see the value right away, the way that I do, about treating the spiritual side of wellness. Turns out, though I ran a successful business for a decade, there's some work you got to put in when you're rebranding. And I walked away from my clinical practice to write this book, to completely pivot out of just being a body expert and into really wanting to tackle the root of our suffering, which I believe is spiritual in nature. And you don't just poke your head out having created a bunch of cool things and the world rushes toward you necessarily. I think we're spoon-fed that kind of narrative constantly, especially in the age of social media. If this one thing just hits, I'm set. So I've been learning. I've been in a giant ego collapse after grieving for 2 years and thinking, yeah, people are going to want help saving their own life. And I think they do. I think they really do want that. There's a lot of work to do to create the kind of visibility that I'm looking to create. So today, when you ask me how I am excited about today and the future. I am hopeful even when I'm heartbroken and my grief rears its ugly head. I am motivated by not outcomes, but urgency to live a life of meaning and purpose. And I am on a mission to serve others in big and small ways.
Yeah. I resonate a lot with that. I wasn't really sure how are you going to answer that question, and so I wasn't sure where I was going to go.
Sure.
But that sparked something in me that's quite interesting that I haven't really talked about in a minute, and it's sort of the same idea. For context, I used to be a professional wrestler, like WWE, so I used to run around a lot in my underwear and all that stuff, and I wanted to be famous as well. Like I had this dying need to be famous or attention or whatever the case may be, all that stuff. But anyways, I stopped doing that, and I had some personal stuff happen in mental health related. And so what I wanted to do was try and bring mental health services to professional wrestlers. And like in the entertainment industry, it's drugs, it's alcohol, it's sex, it's addiction, it's addiction, it's addiction. And very few people understand sort of the plight of the WWE or professional wrestler. I'm one way in the ring because that's how I have to be. That's my character. How do I shut that off? I can't. So I need something to numb myself. I need all of these sorts of things to keep me at that level of 1,000 people cheering my name, of 2,000 people cheering my name. And so I assumed, okay, I've been in that spot. I felt those things. Okay, I'll offer my services. I'll hire some therapists. I'll teach them sort of the lingo of professional wrestling so they have a venue inside of how these people think. And man, people will fucking run for this. It's free of charge. All my wrestling friends will come and they'll want to do it. I ran group sessions for almost 2 years, and maybe one person would show up every single week. And there was over like 300 people in this group of wrestlers. And I just fucking couldn't understand why. Like, it's right there. The help is right in front of you. And we now know there's a bunch of different circumstances that prevent people from getting help and why they don't want it, and maybe what the shame about it, or all these sorts of things. But I don't know. That just popped into my head about you and your book and changing this direction and how you want to help people. And, it's hard. Like, it took you a while to basically accept help and get to the journey that you're on, where you're standing here able to talk about these sorts of things. And so I don't know why I couldn't process why it would be different for someone else, the way it was different for me. It took me a while to figure out who I was and recapture my identity, not as a wrestler and all these sorts of things. It's just very interesting how that sort of parallels with you and with I. You and with I. You and me. Yeah, that's whatever.
It all sounds good. Did you ever recalibrate how you were approaching that problem and find some success? Because I think what's been really interesting, and this is really the story of my life, it just shows up in different ways, is as a recovering perfectionist, among other things, I will always, when I'm in fear and doubt, grief and uncertainty, double down on what I can control. And if I'm not careful, that will lead me into such a tailspin of obsessing and ruminating and beating myself up, where there's no peace, there's no serenity. So in this case, there's this delicate dance between, yes, what I don't have control over is other people. Boy, have I learned that in my life in some seriously painful ways. So I can't make someone ready to do the work when they're not ready, to look at their hardest things and trust me in the meantime until they can trust themselves that there is a way forward. I can't do any of that. I can lead by example. And so when I think about, well, business-wise, what can I control? My messaging, right? Am I being clear and concise? Am I really touching on the very pain point that person on the other side of the screen is experiencing, who I am in fact trying to help? Is there more I could be doing in my local community to let people know I exist? Right? So there's this, where can I take the action so that I'm charging in the direction of my dreams? And every single day, where can I surrender more?
Mm.
So in the realm of what you can control when it comes to what your mission became with mental health and the wrestling space, what did you uncover, if anything, about what you could do differently?
Well,
And also, am I interviewing you? Because I kind of love this.
yeah, that's what happens when you're also a podcaster. I guess it just tables get turned. I shouldn't have shared anything about myself. Damn it, Sam. Yeah. So I never really figured anything out. I never did, and I haven't gone back to it since the beginning of the year, because just other things came up, other things became, more important. But yeah, I never found the answer, and people that I talk to and other people who've tried to start the same thing haven't found much success either. I mean, there was a handful of people who said it really helped them, and I'll take that. That's fucking amazing. But I wanted to reach more people, and this is like the first time I've really thought about it in like 6 or 7 months. And so it's interesting that your story, in this weird way that it went, brought that to my mind. So maybe I'll have to revisit it in the new year and see what things I can come up with. Because now there's all these new communities like School and Circle that you can mesh together and create better content and have better group chats and all these sorts of things. So maybe that's the avenue to help professional wrestlers.
Well, and also you have this podcast, so you are completely being of service and speaking about mental health to whomever is willing to chime in, not just people in entertainment. So there's that too. It's not as if you abandoned that calling completely. It's just floating around, left to be discovered.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely this podcast definitely took became my main focus just because of
Mhm.
that. I feel like I could reach more people and speak to a broader audience. But it took me a while after I retired to become a fan of watching like WWE again, because I have some buddies who still wrestle on TV every week, and I'm like, I need to watch these guys. I need to get back into it. And so I'm finally a fan again. I made my wife watch like a 3-hour show a couple of weeks ago. She loved it. She saw some guy fall off the cage into a table. She was like, he's dead. I was like, he might be. That's the whole point. Suspend your disbelief. It's amazing. So that part actually is super exciting because I feel like a little kid again, watching it. And so from there, maybe something will bloom because my passion for it, my love for it, like I was 12 years old again. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful thing. And so, anyways, enough about me. um, let's jump back into you. Something that I was thinking about a lot in regards to your story was that you've experienced and seen people close to you die.
Mhm.
Um, and why do you think that you're still here after everything that you've been through?
Hmm. There's a lot of things that come to mind when I think about this question. On the one hand, if I just think of my story, there's some luck involved and some terror as well. Where was there luck? Well, I don't know why, but when I overdosed on cocaine, I came to. Some people don't. What is that about? Terror, when I finally did succumb to going to 12-step meetings, even though I hated the language of the steps, and I worked as best I could the steps with this man named Bobby, who I loved very much, who had 22 years sober from heroin addiction. He was a personal training client of mine before he was ever a sponsor. And at the end of my first year, Bobby relapsed. And then 2 weeks later, Bobby died. And in the AA community, he fell out of his 8th-story window. But the people who knew he relapsed, which were few and far between, knew he jumped. That created a level of terror inside of me that taught me not to try to relinquish control over people, places, and things, because I was doubling down on that. And I would continue to double down on that to feel safe in the world for the next 4 years in sobriety. But it taught me that if I drink and use, I'm dead. And I didn't want to die. That level of terror looked like me abstaining from drugs and alcohol for 4 years, but trying to control a marriage that was falling apart until the bitter end, until I was literally going insane and sleeping on people's couches, miserable in sobriety, only thinking every single second of every day of what I could say or do to fix it, to change his mind, to make him forgive me again. There was no peace. There was no access to power. And all of my worthiness was contingent on whether or not this man was going to love me again. That was spiritual rock bottom. And that was the time in my life when I finally signed a lease and moved into an apartment. We were not even legally separated, but by all intents and purposes, I was not being supported financially, emotionally, physically. I mean, it was over, and yet I was hanging on. And I started to work the steps in this new way, in this modern way where we did it around the marital crisis. We stopped talking about drugs and alcohol as the problem, and we started looking at the life circumstance that I was in that was taking away all of my peace. That is the time in my life where I actually built an internal template that was sturdy. that was birthed from me and not the outside world. So there's this spiritual journey that led me to that moment where from that moment on, and when I say moment, let's be real. This was years and years in the making of misery of trying to play out old patterns that had kept me safe as a girl in adulthood into utter insanity and exhaustion. And then for months and months and months and months, practicing new behavior so that I could have a new experience. So it wasn't a moment, it was years in the making. But at that time in my life, I began to develop the tools to start to overcome life's hardest thing. At the same time, if I take all of that and I throw it to the side, I take all of the things that have happened to me and I think back to when I was little and I was in a super dysfunctional household growing up. There was chaos everywhere, unhappily married parents, screaming, fighting all the time. My mom was clinically depressed and self-medicating with prescription drugs that my dad was providing for her. He was in the basement because they hated each other. My sister was sneaking out, having lots of sex and doing lots of drugs. And my mom was having an extramarital affair that she was telling us about. There was just so much shit going on. And yet I had a little spark. Always. I had something inside of me that was like, either something ain't right here and I'm going to speak up about it, or when my little friends in elementary school would be really scared to tell a boy that they liked the boy, I would be like, huh? You don't have the boy. Literally, if you tell him you like him and he says, ew, or I don't care, I don't like you back, you didn't lose anything. It made no sense to me to be afraid.
Yeah.
Right? So on the one hand, in my nature, there is something about me that has always been there that is lit with fire and ambition and trying again. And yet, the circumstances of my life and all of these things that happened also really shape moment to moment why I, in my case, didn't die, but other people around me did. So basically, I have no idea, Aaron. It's like nature, nurture, a wild combination of the two, right? These are things that we'll never really know. I guess what I really know now is that because I'm consciously living my life, every time there has been a subsequent loss since Bobby, I am acutely aware of what my choices are.
Mhm.
Acutely aware. And there's only a few choices. One is to relapse and die. I always have that choice to just say, fuck this. I cannot feel this pain. I will not do it. But I know it will kill me because it killed Bobby. I'm clear about that. And I've built way too big of a life to want to die. Right. So then that's choice number one. Choice number two, which I've tried several iterations of, even into sobriety, which I consider, emotional relapses or behavioral slips. I could avoid a physical relapse, but put all of my focus and attention on whatever external thing that I can control, seemingly, so I don't have to feel the disgusting feelings of the grief. Like when I got a raging eating disorder after my dad died, because I could really control food and body. That was easy compared to feeling my feelings. The third choice, when I lost my sister, felt like the only choice left, which was I'm terrified that I might relapse. I'm terrified of this grief. And this pain hurts as bad as any physical pain you could imagine on earth. This emotional pain hurts that bad. And I do not know how I will survive it. But I know that if I walk straight into the pain and I do something with it, that I could spend the rest of my life with great meaning and great purpose and help potentially save other people's lives too. And that was the choice that I made this time around.
You ever, because I experienced this. I mean, I guess I'll share a personal note based on what you said. I also lost my sister. Her name is Rachel. I lost her to suicide in 2018. And I started jumping into mental health and advocating for mental health as a way to mask dealing with my own feelings. Now, eventually I merged the two, and now I feel pretty good about, talking about it and how I've dealt with some of the hard emotions that's come from losing someone like that. I bring that up to ask you sort of the same question. Do you ever get nervous or scared that the book or helping people or the classes or the courses or the events are just a way for you to mask all of these horrible feelings that you have about other people, yourself, life, death? Because I think there can be sort of a harmony with all of that. But I don't know. What do you think?
Hmm. Well, it's funny. I don't use it to mask my pain. However, because I'm really self-aware, and one of my character traits, right? So in recovery, there's this whole thing about character defects. And this is one of the things that I reimagine about the 12 steps. We're not defective in character. We have traits, all of us, addict or not, good and bad, right? That are either assets or liabilities at any time. One of those character traits for me is chronically people pleasing, wanting to sort of fix and save, because that was the role I played in my family dynamic from the earliest age. So it is not lost on me that perhaps in this great attempt to save lives, I am just in a trauma wound yet again, where because I couldn't save my sister's life, maybe I could save somebody else. And am I just doing the same goddamn thing that I've always done and calling it something else? I have considered that. And there's two things I have to say about that. The first is, if that's true, I could think of worse things to be doing with my pain, number one. Number two, the reality is I was already living by using a modern version of the 12 steps. From that marital crisis for the last 10 years, I was living a spiritual life leading by example of how to walk through the hardest things. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, sometimes gracefully, sometimes in a really ugly way. But I was doing it, and I was doing it sober. And no matter what I said or did with my sister, good and bad, whether I shoved the program down her throat or I stood back and just said, you too can have a happy life. And when you're ready, my hand is extended. My heart is open. And none of it saved her. The truth is, I was already a living, breathing embodiment of the work, and it didn't save her. And I know that, right? So the very, very truth of what I'm doing is that I don't know if it's going to save anybody else's life, which would be a way to just fall back into an old pattern where I'm deflecting and focusing on you instead of me. But what I'm doing is telling you, listener, what saved my life.
Mm.
I can speak to that. That is the truth, and that will always be my truth. And I can't go wrong if I'm sharing that part of me. So that's how I feel about what I'm doing.
Yeah, I feel similar. Like I could be doing something way worse, right? Than sometimes using it as a vehicle to motivate me because I've been an athlete, my whole life, and so that's just sort of how my brain works about everything. And normally, the best athletes in the world are motivated by the chip on their shoulder. They're generally running away from something, which makes them want to work harder, stay in the gym longer, all this stuff, because they're running from something. Some fucking teacher told them they sucked or they weren't good enough or they sat the bench here, like majority. There's very few who are like running towards something who got like a really, healthy self-esteem and all of that shit. But most people don't, right? Most people sort it out as they go, but
Mhm,
they're running away from something, which is this is very, very strong motivator. And you reach a certain point and someone tells you, hey, you don't have to live like that anymore. But what if I lose my edge? What if I lose that thing that drives me, that keeps me on top of my game, that keeps me alert and looking around like, who's my competition? Who do I got to beat? Who do I got to beat? Well, there can be another way. You don't have to totally remove that. And so I think about that in relation to this. Like, I don't have to totally remove the sense of like, I'm doing it to try and help someone. And if I don't ever know that, that's okay. And there's also a healthy side of it that's helped me. It's helped me have light back in my eyes, to create a good relationship, all these sorts of things that have happened, because of it. And so maybe that's how I would frame it to someone else. And I don't know, it seems like that's how you're sort of looking at it as well in regards to your own life and how you want to approach this and how it saved you and what you actually have control over, which is a really important thing to think about. Especially someone like you who's tried to, not to put words in your mouth, but control everything. Now you sort of understand what
mhm,
you do have power over, and it's made you a freer, better version of yourself, which is incredible.
mhm. Yeah.
So, anyways, you ever had liquid death? Anyways,
You know, I
to
haven't.
lighten the mood, quite for a second before we jump back into
I
something else.
haven't had liquid death. Is it good?
No, it's so. I mean, it's just water, um, but the marketing is incredible. Like it's like murder your thirst is on the bottom. It's amazing. Um, yeah.
Perfect for
Uh,
an athlete.
Yeah, like, cause I mean, I stopped drinking, and then so, like, water, like, sort of gets just, like, boring, and I can only drink so much coffee, and so my buddy, who's a wrestler, who's straight edge, like, would always have these at shows, and I was like, "Oh, what's that? Looks like a beer." He's like, "No, it's just water, but it's in a cool can." I was like, "Sold." Sold. But anyways, let's,
Yeah.
I really do, wanna talk about I think when we move on to the next point, it's, like, thinking about now in this life, like, what are you proud of yourself of? Because I think that's something that we don't think about a lot.
Mm. I think about that a lot. I think, first of all, in recovering from perfectionism, a critical daily habit that I am in is, among other things, scanning my day at the end of every day and thinking about what I did well and
Mm,
writing it down. So I am constantly going, good job, Sam. Good job. So it's not hard for me. And I love that I can say this to you, right? This is a direct result of rewiring the brain body connection, which is when you habit hack and you practice these 1% shifts every single day. We have so much research on this now. You literally change your brain, you change your entire experience in the world. And so it is so easy for me to say, damn girl. And so if I zoom out, that part of me that always wanted to be famous now understands this deep well of purpose. And I actually believe, whether I should or not is sort of irrelevant, that I will sell out stadiums as one of the greatest speakers on earth at some point in the future. Okay. I would have never known when I was young that that feeling of whatever I should be doing that's big would have to be about saving lives. I just thought it would be, Britney Spears, Slave for You, 2000 VMAs, move over, bitch. I've got the snake around my neck. Okay. Like, that was the end of my purpose, was to just be the hottest girl on earth and sing at least as good as she can. That said, right, I have these huge ambitions, right? That's a big ass goal. That's a bold thing to say. You want to sell out stadiums? Good luck, girl. No. When I move everything aside, right? Because I don't know if that's going to happen. I believe it absolutely can. I believe I'm more than capable of that happening. I'd love to have that kind of impact. But if I died tomorrow, the greatest truth that I carry with me now is that I've already done the hardest thing, which is breaking the cycle of generational trauma in my lineage, of addiction, of mental illness, of emotional cycles of dysfunction like martyrdom, denial, obsession with the beauty and body standard. I am a sober mom of two who is mindfully moving through the world, trying to take all the hardest things and parent my kids in a way where they have a shot at having that kind of sturdiness on the inside when life shows up and serves them a big pile of shit. Honestly, when I'm gone, my children and their children and their children will have my book forever. All the stories of my life and how I got through them. And a template, a prescriptive template of how they too can get through their hardest thing. They will have the sound of my voice on a podcast. They will know how I thought about things, how I provoked the status quo, how I challenged my own fears and limited beliefs, how I walked through uncertainty. They'll hear the sound of my voice singing because I've started to sing again after 20 years. They will have access to a whole new way of living. I've already done the hardest thing. And I am so fucking proud of that.
What a beautiful thing.
Mm.
Wow. When I thinking about kids, I coach youth baseball, and I'm interacting with a lot of kids, and the way we talk about resilience or getting through hard shit is a serious problem. So how have you been thinking about that with your kids, or how do you think we should be talking to young people about, hey, life is gonna, like you said, throw you a bag of dog shit, like it's gonna knock you down. There's gonna be some involuntary suffering, like things are going to happen. Like, what are we gonna do to deal with it? Because that's just how life is. And that's a beautiful part of it, right? You wouldn't be standing here proud of yourself, like shining bright, if you hadn't gone through all of that. Now, I don't like to use the word grateful. I think about that a lot with my sister. It's like, I don't know, but that's anyways, that's my own shit. It's about you. um, but anyways, back to my sort of my original thought about resilience, just, spin off of, what you think about resilience and how we can teach our kids about that.
When I think about the, you can hear that, huh? It's okay.
Mhm.
People have asked me similar things, and there's so much to teach our children. I mean, for God's sakes, we have to teach them how to wipe their own ass, okay? Let alone how to function when something really horrible happens, okay? And all of it to them feels overwhelming. So in the sea of how much there is to teach our kids, when I reduce down the most important thing that I have learned in my adult life, it's how to trust myself.
Mm.
It's how to trust myself. My earliest memory at 4 was trusting myself enough to say, Mom, why do you have to take those pills every night? And then she said, do you like the things you have? To which I responded, yes. Well, if you like the things you have, I need to make money. In order for me to make money, I need to work. In order for me to work, I need to sleep. These pills help me sleep. What did I learn in that moment? Don't ask that question again, ever. AKA, that little voice told you to ask that question that knew you didn't feel safe when she took those pills. Shut it down. Shut it down. And so every time as I grew older, that intuitive part of me showed up, there was no space for her. I didn't trust her. There was no reason to trust her. And instead, the voice that was like the voice you were talking about in the wrestling world, in the athletic world of push, go, thinner, smarter, harder. That was the voice that I got down with, because every time I listened to that voice, ooh, I got an A. I lost 5 pounds. I got patted on the fucking back. Good job, Sam. And the good job, Sam, came from outside of me. And literally, perfectionism, by the way, is culturally revered. You get so rewarded doing really well. But the thing about perfectionism is it collapses with matters of the heart. And it wasn't until my marital crisis that I learned that. And everything about my spiritual journey led me back to at the 9th step, when this woman in that period of desperation said, have you ever made an amends to yourself? 9th step is making an amends. I was 5 years sober. I had made so many amends outside of myself to people, places, and things. Nobody had ever suggested that I might owe myself an apology for the way I've been speaking to myself for all those years. Why does that matter? It matters in my case because when I began a practice of more compassionate self-talk, because this woman gave me permission to do it, and my critical voice was literally killing me, so I was shit out of options. What started to happen was that I could finally hear, after decades of silence, the whisper of my intuition. And I began to listen to her, to learn from her, and to take action in the direction she was nudging me. And then I learned to trust myself again, because I started to have wins when I let that voice guide the ship. So the one thing I want to teach my children above every single other thing in the world is to trust themselves. Because when they're at a party in high school and somebody wants to give them a drug, if that voice inside that's like, gotta be cool, you gotta do the thing, the part of them that isn't truly who they are, that even though their intuitive voice is like, oh, something doesn't feel right. If that's not strong enough, they're going to listen to the other voice. They're going to listen to the thing outside of themselves. And that might be the pill that has the fentanyl mixed with the cocaine that fucking kills them. That might be it. So at the end of the day, the greatest thing I could ever do is teach my children how to trust themselves.
Yeah, that's fucking cool. That's really cool. Because if you think about confidence, the Latin root meaning for confidence is intense trust in oneself. That's what confidence really means. And so if you're a confident person, that means you have intense trust in yourself, which is exactly what you're saying. And that intense trust in yourself is built on credible self-talk. Why does it have to be credible? Because it has to be real. If I'm an athlete, I'm a baseball player, because I relate everything to that, and I go up to the plate and I say, I'm the greatest baseball player that's ever existed, that's a fucking lie. It's not credible self-talk. I'm putting myself in a worse position. But if I go up there and I say, hey, I prepared for this, I feel good. Great. You might do great, you might not, but at least you're putting yourself in the right spot. And so that's the same way when thinking about talking to ourselves going into these moments. Like if we've built up this credibility that we can trust ourselves, and we have this sense of intuition, and we have supportive parents at home who are like, accepting of mistakes and think about how we can learn from those and create an environment that's like, yeah, if you fall down, we pick ourselves back up and we learn. And I'm here to help you wherever you need, but you can do it on your own. You are capable of that. That whole sort of conglomeration of ideas is extremely powerful. That's why I think, sports are incredibly important for young people, or whatever sort of community you can be in where those challenges are voluntary, where you're putting yourself in hard spaces. That's not life or death, because a party nowadays is uncomfortable. I mean, I just recently got married. Hopefully, God willing, my wife and I can have kids. And I don't know what a party's going to be like for my kids in high school 15, 20 years from now. And I can't imagine you thinking about that as well, with all the stuff that you went through and the situations that you were put in and all of that stuff. It's quite complicated, maybe mixed with a little scary.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting to think about, it's one thing to talk about this large concept. It's another thing to practically applying it to your children now and at different ages in age appropriate ways, right? So a lot of the time when my daughter, who just turned 6, comes to me and comes out of her room with an outfit on, what do you think of this? What do you think of that, Charlie? I don't know. I was asking you. I know. I'm happy to tell you what I think, but I'm curious what you think. Does it feel good? Does it make you comfortable? You feel powerful, right? So it's almost like it's not that much work. It's changing the question around and just making your child go, huh? What do I think of this? You know, is the practice. That is the practice. What do I think of this? How is this making me feel right now? And that goes for anything. They come home with a friend issue.
Hmm.
How did that make you feel when she said that to you? Bad. Hmm. Were you able to tell her how it made you feel? Yeah. Okay. Well, she's definitely still learning, but let's pay attention to that. If you still feel bad when you're spending a lot of time with that friend, you might need to think about who makes you feel good and spend more time with them. So it's crazy to think what I've had to live through to even have the awareness to ask my child that question, which seems so simple. It's so obvious. And yet, I don't know how I would have turned out if I had parents like that. But in my case, I think back to the things I would say leading up to a performance. I would on loop say, I cannot wait until this is over. I cannot wait till the recital is over. I cannot wait till the gymnastics competition is over. Can't wait till the test is over. I'll be happy when it's over. I'll be happy when it's over. I'll be happy. And it was always met with, why shouldn't you just be happy now? I was too much. It was too much, And they missed everything. They missed meeting me in a space of what comes up for you when you think about having to compete. What's happening inside of you? Because then maybe I would have unpacked, oh my God, I want to be the best. Like I want to be perfect at it. What happens when you think you might not be perfect? Like what happens if you make a mistake when you're competing? What happens if you fall off the beat? What happens if you, well, then I'm terrible. Like there could have been like an entry point into, can you trust that you've prepared as best you can and that whatever's going to happen is going to happen and that you're going to be okay regardless and that you're actually not as good as your grade is or that you're good regardless of whether you compete or you don't or you fall off or like, is that even something we can consider? I didn't have any of that, right? So this stupid question is not stupid at all. And it's birthed from decades of trudging through life and learning some really hard things. So, if there's a parent who's listening or a soon to be or a wanting to be parent, turn the questions on your kids. Just turn them back. Everything they ask you. Obviously, there are some things you got to answer. You're the grown up, it's not like a hall pass not to parent, right? But spark their curiosity about themselves.
Yeah. But it is a chance to create agency within themselves, that they are
Right.
capable of making decisions and they are capable of thinking about things themselves, knowing that you're always there. I mean, the best coaches I ever had were the coaches that asked the best questions. It's the worst coach who keeps saying the same fucking thing over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm like, I don't get it. You're saying it the same. I don't get it. What the fuck? Is it my fault? I'm stupid. Shit. Okay. Now I'm not playing anymore. Instead of him seeing that, recognizing, asking different questions, approaching it a different way, same as a parent. Because, I assume your kids are different in ways that you have to approach it a little bit differently, potentially. Yeah, they may have some similarities, because they both came out of you with your genes. But they might be a little bit different. So you have to probably approach situations like a little bit differently. And I think that's what makes someone care, especially when you see a sibling and they're like, okay, well, they treat them that a little bit better, but mom like takes time for both of us and she approaches the situation. She loves us, and that's that's the best feeling in the world. I mean, you could do anything when someone like really loves you and cares for you. So that's special.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point of how different our children can be, my son, who's 9.5, is a mini version of me, which is this incredible opportunity to reparent myself and extremely painful and triggering. So what does that look like, right? And this is him growing up in a house where clearly to the best of our abilities, although, the way kids interpret things, God damn it, I think one of the best things we can do too as parents is when they are regulated after a period of being dysregulated or after we, the parent, have been dysregulated, right? Edgy, sharp, angry, is to tell the story that we really wanted to tell when we were upset, so the child doesn't make up a story in their mind about what everything meant. My son, so I say all that because I am trying deeply, knowing I lived with this brick of shame over my back about never being enough of anything, and how that shame literally almost killed me in recovery. Doing everything I possibly can not to speak in a shame-based way to my children, right? And yet sometimes if you're like, oh, Jack, right? Just take that, just the way it came out in that moment of frustration could create a shame spiral, right? So I say all that to say we're going to fuck up as parents, no matter how mindful we are. That said, he's growing up in a house where his mom and dad are really, really thoughtful about what they say and how we speak to them. And if my son makes a mistake, especially if it's a mistake like a lie, gets caught in a lie, which has happened a couple times, the level of shame is excruciating to watch. He immediately starts to call himself stupid.
Mm.
We've even watched him hit himself, like guttural, where I'm like, oh my fucking God. Like, oh my God, does my child need therapy? Am I doing everything wrong? Am I creating shame? Am I making this worse? Everything gets triggered because I'm just watching my small self, and there were no resources and no tools. My parents were unable to meet me in those places, right? And in those moments, there's no way I could be like, hey, Jack, what is the most loving part of yourself? Say it right now. He'd be like, I mean, seriously, like that whole thing I told you about with Charlie. How do you feel about this? Oh, no, 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 not even a shot in hell, right? So first of all, we've tried every single way to intervene in the dysregulation process in real time. He does not want us to be near him. He does not want us to hug him. We know if you hug for 20 seconds, it releases oxytocin. It helps you calm down. No, no, no. Get away from me. And yet, don't go all the way away from me, because then I think you don't love me, right? So leave me alone. But if you really walk away all the way, like, fuck you, I can't believe you just did. So So we like wait at the end of the hall. If he's in his room, we're like, we're here. When you're ready to talk, we are here. We hear things getting thrown. He's crying. He slowly soothes and starts to regulate, comes back out. Now, here's where the magic happens as a parent. Hey, Jack. That seemed really hard. And it seemed like your perfect voice just got. I know, because sometimes my perfect voice gets really, really loud too. But there are actually other voices inside of us that have a lot nicer things to say than our perfect voice. Perfect voice usually shows up when we feel out of control, and it tries to tell us things to make us feel better, but it actually makes us feel worse. So we can just acknowledge that it showed up and it was really, really loud and it didn't really feel good. And it's going to show up again. It's probably just going to be a part of your life, but it doesn't have to run your life. Definitely doesn't have to be the loudest voice at the party. It could just be background noise. So we're going to wait and see if a kinder voice shows up. Maybe a voice that says something like, that wasn't your best decision, but you're still a great person and you're just learning. That's kind of the voice we want to really lean into. So that's how I parent through Jack.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a different way of getting him to go inward and to not be run by that voice, to not give it power it doesn't deserve, to notice that it's there, and also to wait and acknowledge that that's not all of who he is. It's just a part of who he is. And that the part of him we really want to trust and listen to is the one that has a more loving and kind thing to say, which is another version of this is how you trust yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Am I going to be coined the parenting whisperer after this podcast?
Yes. Yeah, you are.
That I'm tapping into.
This is like it's another new business venture you got to create, and I'm your first customer. But I have an amazing mother. She's incredible. She's gonna listen to this episode. She's listened to every single episode I've ever released.
Oh, I love that.
And she could tell you all sorts of stories about me terrorizing her in the grocery store, after games, all sorts of stuff, but she did the best she could, and she did an amazing job. I'm one of the luckiest people in the whole world to have had two parents that love me and still love me. I mean, that's my greatest competitive advantage that I'll ever have. Like, I think that's to be true always. And so just wanted to mention that based on what you just said about raising a young boy, because it is totally different than raising a girl. And the way you approach it clearly has to be different with your experience. So I can't wait for history to repeat itself if I have a boy, God willing, for him to fucking terrorize me.
It will.
Or to terrorize my wife while me and my daughter have a beautiful relationship, and it's sort of the other way around, or whatever the case, whatever the beautiful family dynamics end up being. But I wanted to touch on one more word before I ask you about some of this other stuff you have going on in the present day. Do you think the word trauma, is overly used in today's society? Like, people place it too much on certain things, or do you think there's the wrong definition of it that people are applying to the wrong situations?
It's so funny, my relationship with words, right? Now I'm an author, so I love words. And yet, in having to reimagine the 12 steps again and again, depending on the new life circumstance, I take words with a grain of salt because words only mean what we make them mean. Once upon a time, nobody talked about trauma, and that was dangerous. I wouldn't want to go back to that time. It's refreshing to me that people are being more candid about hard things that they're working through. Are some people overusing the word? Sure. Are some people underusing the word? Sure. I was on a podcast interview months ago, and multiple people were interviewing me. And they said, this one woman chimed in and she said, okay. So you've had some serious trauma, like legitimate. Nobody's going to contest that, right? And your book says how to rewire your mind for hope, resilience, and joy in the face of trauma. But what if you haven't, or you don't know if you have? What are we going to get out of your book? Right? And so she was kind of coming from this lens of like, here comes the trauma word again. Which I was really happy about because
Yeah, it's a good
this is
question.
what I said to her, and this is what I'm going to say to you. Forget about the word trauma. Forget it. If it triggers you, forget it. If the word trigger triggers you, forget it. Okay? Right now, as you're listening, take a second to scan the quality of your life today, the quality of your work. Do you like your job? Are you counting the minutes until your day ends? Do you know you're in it for the money, but it's really what you want to do, but you don't know what you want to do, so you're staying? The quality of your friendships. Do you have healthy, sturdy, stable friendships, or are they always volatile? The quality of your romantic life. Do you feel like you're going to be alone forever? Do you know you're not with the right person? Just go through each thing. And don't forget the quality of your self-talk, because I would be remiss not to bring that up. Are you being run by a voice inside your head that is constantly making you feel like shit? Or is that just a voice that shows up, but you can lovingly push it to the side and have a voice that's really healthy and powerful show up and say, you got this, right? If, as you're scanning your life in any one of these places or more, you're like, shit, I am in a job I don't like. I am with a partner I know I shouldn't be with. I do think I'm going to be alone forever. You've got work to do. Does it come from some traumatic place? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe it's just something you learned along the way. A limiting belief that's keeping you stuck. A competing belief where you think you deserve a lot of wealth, but the idea of having so much money also means chaos and dysfunction. And your competing belief is floating around in your subconscious, and it's fucking up your ability to become financially abundant. If there are pain points in your present day life, there is work to do. And if you do the spiritual work around the pain point, it will improve. Period.
All right. Well, I'm bought in now to the way that you see the word trauma. Uh,
How do you see it?
no, I mean, I see it in a way that I think majority of time people don't think. I think they see this hierarchy of trauma. They like, I got to reach this level of fucking suck for it to actually be trauma and for me to take care of it. But I'm like in this lower level where like just these things, I know they happen, but like people have it way worse. So fuck me. I'm not going to do anything about it and I'm going to let it go. I think that's where the word, because people talk about it when they go through like the most horrific shit you can think of, obviously, like stuff that you went through and a lot of people have gone through, right? But then if they're below that, if anything's like a little bit less, they're like, oh, I don't reach that threshold. My stuff's not important. I'm going to let it go. It hasn't reached the trauma threshold. And I think that's how a lot of people think about it. At least that's the conversations I've had just with, people in my life, how they think about it. And when I go to schools and stuff. And so if they start to think about it the way that you're talking about, like just scanning the quality of your life or the quality of your relationships or the quality of how you feel when you wake up in the morning or the energy that you have or your ability to want to go do stuff like that, you can think about it in that way. And then, yeah, we can maybe get to some underlying root issues with maybe the help of a coach or someone or, whatever you're going to do. But I think if we can think about it in that way, but I think the reason I bring up trauma so much is that it just like social media sort of buries the word. And then people either want to just like throw the word out itself or they never want to think about it because they don't reach the certain level of threshold they need to for their pain to be worthy of attention, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think.
Yeah. And I everything that triggers us is just a reflection of something that needs to be worked on within us, period. I mean, that's my belief. When I think about the word alcoholic and addict and all this stuff, I have repurposed what those things mean, right? If I am continually trying to fill something inside of me with something outside of me, I'm going to be in constant danger of never feeling enough. So it doesn't matter what word anybody uses around addiction now. I'm like, okay, my practice constantly in all the areas of my life is to have enough inside of me, enough resilience, enough love, enough compassion, enough curiosity that I can draw upon from inside of me at any given time to know that I am enough. I'm going to get through this. It's going to be okay. So it doesn't matter what the word is. It doesn't matter what the words are, a construct of our culture and of our mind, right? So even the idea of letting a word bother us is fascinating to me, right? Is what's that about? Why does that bother you so much? How are you defining that it bothers you that much? What's that about? Yeah. Who cares? Are you happy right now? Are you present and in your body and in your life right now? Are you going to get to the end of it? If you got to the end of it today, would you be proud of the way you live? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, get to work. That's it.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah. So on your journey to be the Taylor Swift of public speaking and sell out fucking stadiums, which is cool. You're doing what? You got some live events or monthly events that you're doing in Los Angeles? What's going on there?
Yeah. So in my effort to want to be this really successful paid public speaker, and also, by the way, to recover out loud, right? Because I've spoken in AA meetings for 15 years and I've been on my podcast for 2 years. I've been on other people's podcasts. I know I can speak. I have a way about me. I'm able to express things in an authentic way without saying and like 1,000 times. But it occurred to me that I ought to be doing this not just in the rooms and not recovering in silence, but recovering out loud. And that all kinds of people are suffering from what I call soul sickness, right? And if that's true, and I have this book now that's this manuscript, this spiritual blueprint for how to get through life's hardest things, well, I had better create my own stage. Because after losing my sister, there was this internal declaration that happened, which was, "Dear Samantha, I hereby grant you permission to be an amazing speaker and to share your story unapologetically to the masses, not just in recovery rooms, so that you might just make someone who's listening feel a little less ashamed of some of the choices they've made. And perhaps in doing that, they will have more hope about their life and get a little closer to their intuition. I'm not in the business of waiting anymore for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, "You're ready now. We'll pay you to speak." They will. But in the meantime, I already know I have something to say. So as I wrote my book, I started making original music again. I went on tour as a choreographer at 40 years old with 2 babies at home and danced all around 5 different cities in Japan. All this creative stuff that I'd always wanted when I was little for the wrong reasons came flooding back in. And I thought, okay, you want to share your story. You have a book out. That's great. Create a little venue, go on a book tour. And then it evolved through a lot of meditation and tapping into my intuition into, what if I got lots of speakers who have compelling stories, whether it's about business and building a billion-dollar brand, whether it's just an amazing spiritual transformation of grit to grace. And I got us all in the same room. And then I added live music. And what if I did it every single month and tried to grow it into this experience? And so tomorrow, December 12th, is my 4th event. It's called Heart Conscious Creators. My last name is Harte. It's epic and I want to use it more. It's for people who are consciously creating their destiny. So it doesn't matter if you're in the entertainment industry, if you're a wrestler, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a mother who's just trying to find her identity again after kids. If you are wanting to mindfully move through the world and create a life you love, you belong there. And it's something I'm really excited about, really proud of. It's a lot of work to put a monthly event together. It comes up really quick. And it's one of many, many projects that I have going on. But our last event had more than 50 people there, and it was only the 3rd one. And so people are getting behind this. People don't exactly know what to expect when they show up. And all the speakers talk about different things. Like this time we're having a guy talking about AI, which of course is top of mind for a lot of us. We also have a guy who was part of selling Quest Nutrition for $1 billion cash when he started out as a high school dropout. I mean, we've got speakers talking about all kinds of amazing things. And we have my story, right? Which is really more about overcoming not just addiction, but adversity again and again, overcoming perfectionism, learning to trust yourself. So people come in and they get all this value, and then they get that magical experience when you go to a concert and you get to heal and connect through music. So it's extremely cool. I've been thinking, because it's the end of the year, like, God, this time next year, it'll be my 16th event. What will it look like? Who will show up? What will happen? Who will I meet? Whose life will I affect? And think of how many reps I'm getting in speaking, right? So that is my passion project right now that I believe also could be seriously monetized at some point, but I'm not even really thinking about that right now. I'm just thinking about impact.
It's fucking really cool, Samantha. Really, really, really cool.
I wish you lived closer. If you're up
well,
in
I
LA,
just
you
I
can
happen to be in Los Angeles every 4 weeks on the day of your event. It's really crazy. So it's like wild.
No, but seriously, if you are in LA,
I'll come. Whatever. I got free time.
I
I'll
have
take my wife. It'll be cool.
I have the next 3 months dates. So if you ever happen to be here, we can coordinate.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Like it, I'm pitching you on your own podcast.
Sounds good to me. I mean, yeah. to sort of put a bow on the conversation, is there anything that I didn't ask you, anything that I missed that you feel is important to share before I let you go?
Hmm. Well, you asked really great questions, so thank you for that. And I would just say that, once upon a time, I had this amazing framework as a physical therapist to rewire the nervous system and get people back to full fitness, full function. And that was amazing, but it wasn't enough. And then I wrote a book and created a modern trauma informed reinvention of the 12 steps. So when I work with people now, which is extremely important to me to do one-on-one work, I don't just teach you everything you need to know about your body so that it functions the way you want and you prevent injury so you can keep doing the thing you want. I teach you about your spirit and I give you a roadmap. And these things become woven into the fabric of who you are and how you live. And it really makes you unstoppable. And it doesn't mean you don't have pain and heartbreak. It just means you know how to love yourself through it. And so for everyone listening, there is a method to all of this that is backed by science and it's available, right? I coach people all around the world. So it's extremely important to me that I get in the trenches with people and guide them through this crazy thing called life.
Mm. Well, I very much appreciate you. Glad we got connected. Glad I got to speak to you. Glad I know that you exist. And
Likewise.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.